Welcome back to the Rock Vault, where the amps are always hot. Today we're dusting off the vinyl to revisit 13 unsung rock bands of the 1970s. These aren't the household names, but the hidden gems that soundtracked smoky clubs, late-night drives, and unforgettable summers. If you were tuned into FM radio in the mid-70s, chances are you couldn't escape the gritty boogie rock stomp of Foghat. Born out of London's blues rock scene, they fused driving guitar riffs with a swampy swagger that sounded more Mississippi Delta than English countryside. Songs like Slow Ride and Fool for the City became permanent fixtures of the decade, blasting from muscle cars and beer-soaked bar rooms alike. Their sound was earthy, yet electrifying, built for live stages and the kind of nights that stretched until sunrise. Foghat's energy wasn't just on vinyl. It came alive in their concerts. Fans who saw them back then remember sets that were raw, loud, and gloriously jam-heavy. Their 1977 live album captured that magic and became one of the best-selling live records of the era. There was a looseness to their performances. But beneath it all, the band was locked in tight, pulsing like a well-oiled machine. For those who grew up with Foghat, the music recalls windows rolled down on endless highways, the static hum of FM stations fading in and out, and the kind of freedom only the 1970s could deliver. Teenagers cranked their stereos until the neighbors complained, while college dorms echoed with the sound of that unmistakable boogie groove. Foghat wasn't chasing the sophistication of prog or the stadium theatrics of Zeppelin. They were about sweat, grit, and the sheer joy of rock and roll. And though they might not always get mentioned alongside the biggest names of the decade, Foghat carved out their own corner of rock history. Their music was proof that sometimes simplicity, swagger, and a driving riff are all you need to leave a permanent mark. Out of the swamps and back roads of Arkansas came a band that lived and breathed Southern rock before it had a name. Black Oak, Arkansas was raw, wild, and downright unpredictable. Fronted by the flamboyant Jim Dandy Mangrum, a frontman whose growl and stage antics would later inspire performers like David Lee Roth. Their music blended hard rock grit with country twang, fueled by twin guitars and a swamp boogie rhythm section that could turn any stage into a roadhouse party. Their songs weren't just played. They were performed with a reckless abandon that made every show feel like a revival. Tracks like Jim Dandy and Hot and Nasty captured that sweaty, unpolished energy. They never hit the towering heights of Lynyrd Skynyrd or the Allman Brothers, but what they lacked in chart dominance, they made up for in sheer personality. Fans came not just for the music, but for the spectacle. A rock circus drenched in Southern swagger. If you were lucky enough to see them in the 70s, you remember the chaos. Jim Dandy strutting in bare-chested bravado, guitars wailing like chainsaws, and a crowd that was as much a part of the show as the band itself. They embodied the restless freedom of the American South, equal parts rowdy, rebellious, and joyous. For small-town fans especially, Black Oak, Arkansas felt like their band, carrying their spirit onto the national stage. Looking back, they may not have filled arenas like their Southern rock peers, but they carved a place in rock history as pioneers of unfiltered stage presence. Black Oak, Arkansas proved that rock and roll wasn't always about polish or precision. It was about heart, energy, and the thrill of leaving it all on the stage.
It's built around me. There is a dark, and there is a...
While prog giants like Yes and Genesis were making headlines, Atomic Rooster carved their own darker, heavier path through the early 70s. Founded by keyboardist Vincent Crane after his stint with the Crazy World of Arthur Brown, the band fused progressive rock's ambition with the grit of hard rock and the soul of funk. Their sound was defined by roaring Hammond organ riffs, pounding drums, and vocals that carried both menace and melancholy. Tracks like Tomorrow Night and Devil's Answer briefly stormed the UK charts, offering a glimpse of what could have been a breakout career. But frequent lineup changes and the shifting tides of the decade kept them from holding on to the spotlight. Still, their blend of progressive darkness and soulful intensity left a deep impression on fans who were searching for something beyond the mainstream. For listeners in the 70s, discovering Atomic Rooster felt like stumbling across a secret treasure. The music wasn't polished radio pop. It was brooding, mysterious, and sometimes unsettling. The kind of sound you might have first heard through a friend's crackling record player late at night. For some, those records became cult favorites, the soundtrack to hazy afternoons and long conversations about where rock was headed. Even though they never achieved the commercial success of their peers, Atomic Rooster embodied the restless experimentation of the era. They were unafraid to push boundaries, to mix the soulful with the sinister, to give rock fans something heavier, darker, and entirely their own. In doing so, they earned their place as one of the decade's unsung innovators. Emerging straight out of London's counterculture scene, the Pink Fairies were never meant for the mainstream. They thrived on chaos, mixing psychedelic fuzz, proto-punk attitude, and anarchic energy into a sound that was as raw as it was rebellious. Aligned with the underground Notting Hill freak scene, they embodied the spirit of free festivals and street-level rock, often playing loud, unpolished sets that felt more like a call to arms than a polished performance. Their songs, gritty and drenched in distortion, weren't crafted for chart positions. Instead, they were born for squats, basements, and makeshift festival stages, where the crowd was as unpredictable as the band itself. Albums like Never Never Land captured their untamed blend of garage rock and psychedelia, cementing their status as cult heroes rather than commercial successes. For fans who discovered them back in the 70s, the Pink Fairies weren't just a band. They were an experience. Their music blasted out of battered speakers, filling the air with a rebellious spirit that felt like freedom itself. If you were at one of their free shows, you'll remember the wild scene. Guitars howling, amps buzzing, the band lost in noise and sweat, while the audience danced, shouted, and lived every second of it. Though they never broke into the mainstream, the Pink Fairies stood as a reminder of rock's most vital quality: unpredictability. They weren't about polish or commercial polish. They were about rebellion, experimentation, and the thrill of music that refused to be tamed. In a decade where many chased perfection, the Pink Fairies gave us something else entirely: the beauty of raw, unfiltered rock and roll. In an era when rock was splitting between prog's complexity and punk's raw simplicity, Bebop Deluxe carved out a world all their own. Led by the visionary guitarist and songwriter Bill Nelson, they blended glam rock sheen with progressive ambition, wrapping it all in futuristic themes that made them sound ahead of their time. Their guitar-driven sound was lush, yet razor-sharp, filled with soaring solos, shimmering keyboards, and lyrics that felt like science fiction poetry set to a rock and roll backbeat. Albums like Sunburst Finish and Modern Music showed just how wide their palette was, mixing elegance, intelligence, and hooks that deserved far more radio play than they ever got. Nelson's guitar work was dazzling without ever losing soul, a rare balance of technical wizardry and emotional storytelling. For fans in the know, Bebop Deluxe felt like a hidden treasure, a band that rewarded deep listening with layers of nuance and artistry. Hearing them in the 70s was like being invited into a secret society. Their songs weren't the anthems blasting from every Camaro on Main Street. They were the ones you played late at night with headphones on, staring at the album art and feeling transported somewhere else entirely. For many fans, Bebop Deluxe captured that strange combination of wonder and melancholy that defined growing up in the 70s. Though they never achieved the household recognition of their peers, their influence has lasted. Musicians still cite Bill Nelson's guitar style and imaginative songwriting as inspirations, while fans continue to treasure their records like rare artifacts. Bebop Deluxe may not have conquered the charts, but they gave us music that expanded rock's imagination. And that's what makes them unforgettable. Long before they became staples of the heavy metal underground, UFO began as a bluesy, space rock outfit floating through London's late 60s scene. But when German guitar prodigy Michael Schenker joined the band in the early 70s, their sound transformed into something fierce, melodic, and unforgettable. Suddenly, UFO weren't just another hard rock group. They were pioneers, bridging the gap between psychedelic rock and what would later become heavy metal. Their albums in the mid-70s, like Phenomenon and Force It, bristled with scorching guitar riffs, soaring vocals from Phil Mogg, and bass lines that thundered with urgency. UFO weren't about radio-friendly hooks. They were about creating music that felt alive, dangerous, and otherworldly. Songs like Doctor Doctor hinted at the future of arena rock, while Schenker's solos left countless young guitarists standing slack-jawed in record shops, convinced they'd just heard the future. For fans who caught them live, UFO were an experience like no other. The smoke-filled halls, the pulsing strobes, the searing guitar leads. It was the kind of show that stayed with you long after the last encore. Teenagers in denim jackets would huddle outside concert halls, buzzing about Schenker's guitar runs, while their records spun endlessly on bedroom turntable, fueling air guitar dreams. Though they never reached the same commercial peaks as their hard rock contemporaries, UFO left fingerprints all over the next generation. Bands like Iron Maiden and Metallica have pointed back to UFO as a crucial influence, proof that even the forgotten acts of the 70s could shape rock's future in monumental ways. In the end, UFO were more than just a hard rock band. They were architects of a sound that was both raw and refined, powerful, yet melodic. For those who remember blasting their records in the 70s, UFO will always stand as one of the great unsung voices of that golden decade.
She said there's nothing I can try to keep you rocking like a butterfly.
The Flamin' Groovies were one of those rare bands that never seemed to fit neatly into any box. And maybe that's why they've remained a cult favorite. Starting as a raw, garage rock act in the late 60s, they re-emerged in the 70s with a jangly power pop sound that predated the punk explosion and nodded back to the spirit of 60s rock. Their versatility made them hard to pin down, but impossible to ignore. Albums like Teenage Head carried a raw, Stones-like swagger, while later records such as Shake Some Action shimmered with chiming guitars that echoed the Byrds and forecasted the coming new wave. They were a band caught between eras, carrying the grit of rock's past while hinting at its future. For fans in the know, they were proof that rock didn't have to choose sides. It could be both rebellious and melodic. For those who stumbled onto them in the 70s, listening to the Flamin' Groovies was like finding a secret doorway in rock history. Teenagers with crates of records tucked away in their bedrooms often whispered about them like they were in on something special. Because they were. Their songs weren't dominating top 40 radio, but they carried the kind of spirit you couldn't fake. Joy, rebellion, and an almost innocent love for the music itself. Though they never hit the mainstream spotlight, the Flamin' Groovies left fingerprints all over the future. Bands from punk to power pop would cite them as influences, carrying their mix of grit and melody into the next decade. They may not have been household names, but for those who remember spinning their records in the 70s, the Groovies remain one of rock's most treasured hidden gems. When Ronnie Montrose strapped on his guitar, something in rock shifted. His self-titled debut with vocalist Sammy Hagar in 1973 delivered a punch of hard rock energy that felt raw, powerful, and unapologetically loud. Often called America's answer to Led Zeppelin, Montrose fused bone-crunching riffs with soaring vocals, laying groundwork for the kind of arena-ready rock that would dominate the decade. That debut album, featuring tracks like Rock the Nation and Bad Motor Scooter, became a rite of passage for young guitar slingers. Ronnie's tone was thick and muscular, while Hagar's vocals soared with a mix of grit and youthful swagger. The combination felt unstoppable. And though the band never reached the household fame of Zeppelin or Aerosmith, their music became essential, listening for those who wanted their rock fast, heavy, and wild. If you were a teenager in the 70s with a beat-up Camaro and a love for cranking your stereo until the windows rattled, Montrose was the perfect soundtrack. The band's riffs carried the smell of hot asphalt and the thrill of summer nights, when freedom felt just a tank of gas away. Fans remember dropping the needle on that first record and feeling like they'd uncovered a secret, a band that wasn't just good, but dangerous in all the right ways. While Montrose as a band burned bright and fast, their influence endured. Sammy Hagar went on to front Van Halen, carrying pieces of that same raw fire, and Ronnie Montrose remained a respected guitarist who inspired countless players. For those who remember the debut spinning on turntables in '73, Montrose will always be that hidden gem. Loud, heavy, and unforgettable.
Do you think I would be such a fool as I drank from a stack?
If British blues rock had an underdog story, the Groundhogs would be its leading chapter. Fronted by the criminally underrated guitarist Tony McPhee, this trio took the raw energy of the blues and twisted it into something darker, heavier, and uniquely their own. In the early 70s, albums like Thank Christ for the Bomb and Split showed just how far blues rock could be stretched without losing its soul. The band's sound was both gritty and adventurous. McPhee's guitar tone was jagged and unpolished, yet full of fire, while the rhythm section pushed forward with relentless drive. Songs like Cherry Red became cult favorites, striking a balance between blues tradition and the proto-hard rock that was about to take over the decade. The Groundhogs were proof that not every band needed radio polish to make an impact. Sometimes raw honesty carried the most power. For fans who picked up their records in the 70s, the Groundhogs felt like a secret you didn't share with just anyone. These weren't the tracks you'd hear blaring on top 40 stations. They were the ones discovered in dusty record bins, taken home, and played on repeat until the grooves wore thin. If you were a guitar player back then, chances are you tried to mimic McPhee's sharp, cutting solos, even if you could never quite capture that same intensity. Though they never reached the commercial heights of their contemporaries, the Groundhogs embodied the restless spirit of the time. They were explorers on the edge of blues and rock, unafraid to take risks that bigger acts avoided. For listeners who remember, the Groundhogs weren't just a band. They were a testament to how raw energy and innovation could collide to create something unforgettable.
I know you try to fake, but which still throws you out the door.
If progressive rock was about pushing boundaries, Van der Graaf Generator were among the boldest explorers of them all. While bands like Genesis and Yes leaned on grandeur and melody, Peter Hammill and his crew embraced something darker, more theatrical, and hauntingly intense. Their music often felt like a gothic storm, organs roaring, saxophones cutting through the mix, and Hamill's voice shifting from fragile whispers to anguished shouts. Albums like H to He Who Am the Only One and Pawn Hearts weren't easy listens, but that was never the point. These were sonic odysseys, restless, dramatic, and unafraid to confront the shadowy corners of rock's imagination. Though their sound didn't translate into mainstream radio hits, Van der Graaf Generator earned deep respect from fans who craved something beyond the ordinary. For those who discovered them in the 70s, listening to Van der Graaf Generator was an almost cinematic experience. You didn't just put them on while driving. You set aside time, dropped the needle, and let the music swallow you whole. Many fans still remember those late nights, sitting cross-legged by the record player, staring at the album sleeve, and feeling like they were peering into another dimension. Though they never achieved commercial superstardom, their fearless approach influenced countless artists across prog, punk, and even post-punk. Bands from King Crimson to the Mars Volta would carry elements of their daring spirit forward. For listeners who wanted rock to be more than just entertainment, for those who wanted it to challenge, unsettle, and inspire, Van der Graaf Generator was the hidden gem that delivered.
It's nature's way of telling you something's wrong.
In the swirling crossroads of psychedelic, jazz, and folk rock, Spirit carved out one of the most unique voices of the early 70s. Fronted by guitarist Randy California and anchored by Ed Cassidy, the LA drummer with the shaved head, who happened to be his stepfather, Spirit was unlike any other band of their time. Their music carried an airy, almost mystical quality, where fuzzed-out guitar lines danced with jazzy rhythms and lyrical musings about nature, technology, and the future. Spirit's 1968 debut already showed flashes of brilliance, but it was in the early 70s where their sound blossomed into cult legend. Songs like Animal Zoo and Nature's Way blended thoughtful lyricism with hooks that still shimmer today. They could jam with the best of the psychedelic rockers, but there was always a reflective undercurrent, something that felt a little wiser, a little more searching. Fans who remember dropping the needle on Spirit records recall being transported. The music wasn't just about escaping. It was about thinking, about asking questions while the world outside was changing fast. College dorms and smoky basements alike echoed with Randy California's soulful guitar tones, creating memories that still stir nostalgia decades later. Spirit never broke into the mainstream on the level of contemporaries like Jefferson Airplane or The Doors, but their influence has rippled far and wide. From Led Zeppelin's early admiration of Randy California's, playing to countless jam and psych rock acts who followed, Spirit remains one of the 70s' true hidden treasures. For those who remember, their music was more than entertainment. It was a companion for navigating the uncertain times of a restless generation. Before Electric Light Orchestra took flight, there was The Move, a band that bridged British psychedelia and hard rock with daring experimentation. Led by Roy Wood, and later joined by a young Jeff Lynne, The Move was a whirlwind of styles, thunderous riffs, whimsical lyrics, and a stage presence that was as unpredictable as their records. In the late 60s, they were already stars in the UK. But by the early 70s, their sound shifted into heavier, more ambitious territory. Tracks like Brontosaurus brought crunching guitar power, while Tonight shimmered with melodic hooks that could have dominated FM radio. They were a band constantly on the move, reinventing themselves with every release. While the UK recognized their brilliance, American audiences never fully embraced them, and so they slipped under the radar internationally, overshadowed by the ELO juggernaut that followed. For fans who remember them in the 70s, The Move was a spark of everything exciting about British rock. Bold, eccentric, and unafraid to take risks. You might recall hearing their songs late at night on underground FM stations, or discovering their singles tucked away in record bins, waiting for curious listeners willing to dig a little deeper. Their concerts were rowdy, colorful affairs, filled with energy that matched their adventurous music. Though they never achieved the global stardom of the bands they influenced, The Move's DNA can be heard in glam rock, prog, and even power pop. They served as the launchpad for ELO, but their own legacy is worth celebrating. A band that refused to stand still, pushing rock forward with every note. Among the experimental corners of 70s, rock, Curved Air stood out as one of the most daring. Fronted by the striking vocals of Sonia Christina and powered by violinist Daryl Way, they blended prog rock's complexity with a theatrical flair that made their sound instantly recognizable. With layers of keyboards, electric violin, and soaring melodies, their music felt cinematic. Sometimes tender, sometimes ferocious, but always imaginative. Their single, Backstreet Love, cracked the UK top 5 in 1971, proving they had mainstream potential, but their albums pushed far beyond pop accessibility. Records like Air Conditioning and Second Album showcased an ambitious band willing to explore uncharted sonic territory. For fans who discovered them, Curved Air felt like stepping into another world, one where rock could be as sophisticated as classical music and still pulse with raw energy. If you were spinning their records back then, you'll remember how different they felt from the average rock band. Curved Air weren't background noise. They were an experience. Many listeners recall late nights with headphones on, their swirling soundscapes carrying them somewhere between a rock concert and an art house film. Though they never reached the heights of Yes or King Crimson, Curved Air left their mark on prog rock history. Their fearless experimentation and Sonia Christina's commanding presence proved that even bands outside the spotlight could craft unforgettable music. For those who remember, Curved Air will always remain one of the 70s most fascinating hidden gems. And there you have it, 13 unsung rock bands of the 1970s that may not have dominated the charts, but left fingerprints all over the golden era of rock. These were the groups that soundtracked smoky bars, long drives, and late-night record spins, proving that not all legends were household names. Their riffs, their energy, and their spirit remain timeless reminders of when rock was still wild and unpredictable. Which of these hidden gems takes you back the most? Drop your memories below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, keep the vinyl spinning.